everybody, welcome to What the Flick, episode 12 of season 4 of The Americans. Roy Rogers in Franconia. I've been to Franconia, and I've been to many Roy Rogers in my youth.
I've been to Paradise, but I've never been to me.
Have you ever been to Roy Rogers? Did you ever?
Yes, I remember those.
Good fried chicken. That's my recollection. The Double R Bar Burger.
I say the cheeseburger, but that weird thing where they were all sitting there under the heat lamp when you came in, and
That's right. I forgot about the heat lamp. It was great. And you'd make inexplicable decisions, like not the one in front, the third one. Why?
Not to be confused with Kenny Rogers, which was a whole other
Kenny Rogers
chain.
Roaster, delicious.
Those were great chicken.
Yeah, really good chicken at Kenny Rogers Roaster.
Anyway, you're Ben, I'm Alonso.
Yes, that's right. So this episode really, Paige, obviously she was a critical plot point. It always seemed that she was a critical part of the story, but she's become the third most important character on this show.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. At some point, she went from. You're right. I think she kind of started as a plot device, like, will she figure it out? So the sort of the possible suspense at home. But yeah, now she's very much ingrained into the story, and she is part of. I mean, almost part of the mission in a way, I guess.
If you ever got a chance to talk to the showrunners, I'd love to do Q&As with all these showrunners. I'd be curious how, how much is mapped out. We always want to know how much is mapped out. How much did you realize? Oh, you know what? This is a new direction we can go to. Joe Weisberg, I think, is the showrunner. So
especially with kid actors,
right? Kid actors, you don't know how you couldn't have planned because you don't know she's going to be capable of it.
Right. I mean, Kiernan Shifka on Mad Men wound up to be like this amazing talent, but who knew when they cast her when she was like 8 or whatever?
Right, when she's little Sally. So and Holly Taylor is phenomenal, and clearly capable of handling all this weight. She's older, in reality, of course. But we get dramatic moments with her here because she asks so many questions. She's relentless with Elizabeth with the why, how come? And Elizabeth, I think passing up a real opportunity to lie. When she says, how many people did you, there we go, get a screen time. How many people did you kill? I think the answer needs to be 2. Like 1 years ago, one about 3 years ago really shook me up. But instead she says, in effect,
I lost count.
I don't think she says I lost count. She goes, I don't know. But usually, if you've killed 4 people, you know
they
it's
stick
4.
with you.
Right, it's not 4. I think if you've killed 6 people, they stick with you. I think when you get up, is it 13? Is it 16? Then you've lost count. So it's a lot, and she keeps asking questions.
It's interesting because, they've entered this phase where let's be honest with Paige and let's build this thing of trust, and it's like, well. Being honest with Paige means being honest with Paige, and so when she asks questions like that, and Paige is going to ask them, you got to then deal with the fallout of how those answers are going to go.
Yeah, although as you mentioned, we did a different Facebook Live review of this, but as you mentioned, interestingly, they didn't take a tact, which they could have when one of her questions is, don't tell me that it's not when Philip says, you don't have to do this for us. You want to be friends with Matthew, be friends with Matthew, but you don't have to do this for us. And she's like, what do you mean? You made me, I didn't want to be friends with Pastor Tim and Alice, and you made me do that. But they passed up what could have been.
The difference being, you created the Pastor Tim and Alice situation. You talked to them, you let them know our secret. So and then it was your responsibility to keep tabs on them and make sure they weren't going to do anything with that information. Whereas Matthew is Matthew, and we've got Stan covered. We're good. That I was surprised they didn't come back with that as an answer, because that seemed to me like that was the obvious answer as to why those two things were indeed different.
But I imagine though the way things have gone on this show, there'll be a moment where after them making very clear they don't want Paige to spy for them, they're in fact horrified by it.
Yeah.
That they'll need some information from Stan, and they're like, Paige, next time you're talking about. So Paige, the most curious child in America, Henry, the George W. Bush of children.
I have no idea what's going on.
I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. I'm not interested. But you imagine that there's going to be a moment when Henry, sometime, maybe not in the finale, but sometime in the next 23 episodes, where, unless he gets sent off to military school, where Henry is...
stumbles upon something,
And also there's the dynamic now of Henry, who loves having this older, cool friend in Matthew, and then that friend maybe starts dating your sister. That could be
awkward.
And a tough moment for him, which could, drive the plot in some direction. So we've seen so many of the Russians in this show hesitate. Philip has been weak throughout, and weak. I mean, in a sense, thoughtful, right?
Yeah. He's been weak on mission but strong on conscience.
Right, strong on conscience. Right, so that's been true. And now, but Elizabeth finally breaking down with what's her name?
Young Lee.
In that regard, and also with Paige. Like Elizabeth wanted to recruit Paige, but when they realized when Paige volunteers that information about Stan, she says she's horrified.
Right. Well, and I've talked periodically on when we talked about this show that there's a weird sort of parallel about how this show, even though it's about spies and the Cold War, that it's also kind of about the immigrant experience in general, where I think parents are torn between wanting their kids to be like them and then wanting them to sort of embrace, the new world. And so I think the idea of Paige spying is that dichotomy for them, where it's like, well, we thought we wanted this, but now that we're seeing it happen, we'd rather you just hang out with your friends.
Right. I'm sure. Yeah. I feel like they're like showbiz parents are like, you could go to law school, but then they're like, oh look, she's acting. But also we see it in Dylan Baker, William, who is like, I'm just not going to do this. Although Frank Langella talks him into it.
Oh yes, you
by reminding who you are, and then you'll get a hero's welcome at home. But Oleg also from recognizing that when he was because Oleg came up, was it Oleg who realized it, or did Arkady? That's not his name. Who's his boss?
Yeah, Arkady.
That Arkady, one of them went talking about how the Soviets almost accidentally launched nukes.
Oh right, yeah, on the day after episode,
they confused sunspots, right?
Yes,
with incoming missiles. But his recognizing as he studies the technology stuff, how ill-equipped they are, and he now knows about the biological stuff from Aunt Nina. So he decides because he values his country, or maybe I think maybe he wants Nina to stay, or somehow there's just this instinct to sabotage her. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's different things going on. Part of it is maybe he's resentful that she got promoted above him. Part of it could be that he wants her to stick around, and I think part of it is the same thing with William, where it's sort of like, we're not talking about nukes and silos, and even those are dodgy enough, but this is like a vial in a briefcase that could just be dropped,
Or, and as he said, it's a country sent to where the refrigeration component won't hold, and it'll get into the airstream accidentally because they're sloppy. They don't have money.
Look at the episode with the cough drop box and the guy in the airport shuttle. A million things can go wrong with this stuff.
That's right. It's being handled carelessly. It was in a mason jar, and a rat in the mason jar, playing to Cuba, with Martha.
With Martha.
Right, with Martha, yeah.
Oh, well, Martha, the call to Martha's parents.
Just a touching base there, indicating that we're not done with Martha.
Yeah.
At least as something that's going to motivate.
She's okay. Stop talking to the feds.
So I just read on Vulture that because they get on Dylan Baker pretty quickly when they get that tip, when Stan gets the tip from Oleg.
Right.
But here in Vulture, they say they already had agents on him. And the direction shows, and we focused a lot on the woman. That when Dylan Baker is walking down the street, there's a woman walking across the street, and I don't know if that's an agent, but it's like they stayed with her, suggesting, is what Vulture is pointing out, that they already have agents on William. I missed that.
I guess I missed that too, but well caught, Vulture.
Yeah. But obviously they're gonna. There's no mystery. They think they've got the guy because they made up. He's using a name of somebody who died in 1932. So they're going to get William. Did you look at the coming next week?
I did, yeah.
So they get William. But we don't know what that means, and William.
What good it will do them,
anyway, very interesting stuff. Obviously set up to come. But I'm glad to know. We keep mentioning it, but we're clearly calmed by the fact that there's 23 more episodes. So this doesn't even have to be that big a season finale. We don't even need it. Right, it could just be it'll be dramatic, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of action because it's still a television show.
And I think one of the effect of binging is the cliffhanger is less important.
That's right.
Because people, they're just gonna
go right from
exactly launch right into the next thing.
And who knows how far we're gonna get. We're gonna we got Gorbachev coming. We were talking before on the Facebook Live one that would we get to the wall coming down, but we don't even need to because Because Gorbachev, things were starting to change. Like tensions
Absolutely.
were lessening by the mid '80s, or at least into Reagan's second term.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, by this stage of the Cold War, you're dealing with people who are. I think you can only stare down mutually assured destruction for so long before you kind of realize this is not really a viable strategy, you know.
Right.
And so,
Well, I mean, it depends on who's in charge.
well, obviously, yeah. But I think when you start looking at things like biological warfare, you know, you get people like, you know, Oleg and William saying, let's not do it, you know. And you can still be committed to the sort of the ideology of the Soviet Union without maybe, you know, but you could begin to question some of the mechanics, you know.
Also, you know, when just from a TV point of view, when Frank Langella says, "You'll do this last thing for me, and then you'll go home. You get a nice house, you get a wife, you get a nice life, you get a hero's welcome."
You're dead.
Yeah, you're not getting any of those things.
No,
yeah,
no, never.
Yeah, you're getting the inside of an American prison or worse.
Or a box.
Right, or a box. Yeah, I don't suspect we're going to get Dylan Baker's name in the credits next year. I don't. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? You never know.
True.
Good stuff as always. Thanks for watching. Back with the season finale of The Americans next week.